American society is becoming more and more aware and awake to a lot of these sex crimes. How prevalent is this stuff? How often is it happening? I mean, without putting a number on it, because we can't, where children, teens, and even adults are just not speaking out because they don't want all the blowback.
Look out every window in this room. Every direction you look, it's happening. Sound of Freedom was great for awareness, but it ultimately distracted us from what's happening right here in our own cities and towns, and even in America, here in our backyards. Our minds are wired to protect us, and so we almost can't fathom that that's an actuality and a reality in our cities and in our schools and our churches. But perpetrators, they prey on children. They purposely place themselves where children are taught to trust the title or the environment. It's everything they do is calculated, and they target the victims within those entities and places.
There's a rite of passage. It takes wild courage.
Yes.
Wild.
So I feel like there's things in society that, and in politics, that don't go talked about. And I feel like a lot of times we're focusing on things that aren't the most important things, and there's things under the surface that it's like, what about this? And one of those things is children, human trafficking, and specifically child sex crimes. And we just went through an election, and I feel that a lot of the politicians on both sides from across the whole country don't bring this up. And to me, it's like a big elephant in the room, and it's something that should be talked about. It's a difficult topic, but it needs to be put out there. And nobody has done that more and stronger across the country than Kayleigh Kozak. Kayleigh, welcome to the show. Obviously, the namesake of Kayleigh's Law. I've been following you, and you really committed your life to giving a voice to these children.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here and see you again. Like you said, it's been so long. So happy to be here and happy to be in this fight the way that I am.
Yeah, and the reason I open like that is because I'm a common sense type of guy. And it's like, if you have this happening in our society, say the quiet part out loud. What are we going to do about it? And from top on down, corporations, politicians, why aren't we talking about this more? So I really do applaud you. And I know you had a big win in this last election with the Prop 313.
Yes.
So congratulations there.
Thank you.
But let's get into it. Like, where did this whole story start for you?
So I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And to this day, I am still just being screwed by the judicial system. What they tell you is not what's actually happening. And if they were honest about things when it comes to victims and their families, things would be 100% different. And so, unfortunately, in 2020, my life turned upside down because the man who sexually abused me as a child, who was convicted, was petitioning to have his so-called lifetime probation lifted. Well, lifetime doesn't mean lifetime. And I asked what protection would be available for me if his probation was lifted, and found out and learned that there was no such thing as post-probation protection. That's where Kayleigh's Law actually came from. So Kayleigh's Law gives victims and survivors of most notably sex crimes, but also some domestic violence crimes, natural life protection from their abuser, regardless of if they're on or off probation.
You talk about PTSD and you talk about trauma, and these are things that you openly share on your social media. When you got the call or the letter, whatever, that your abuser could possibly get out, I mean, how deep did that go in your core? I mean, it just fear?
I honestly, no, it wasn't fear at the time. I disbelief and unable to comprehend how this was even a possibility. When you're told as a child, and your parents who accept a plea deal on your behalf because you're a child, that this is for a lifetime, and then you find out that in fact it's not, how can you wrap your mind around that? You know, I was just having this conversation with someone. We expect people to fully comprehend and absorb extremely important information in the most traumatic times of their lives. That's why we have prosecutors or doctors that come in and tell us we're unable to retain that information. And that's why we've been conditioned to trust these people and their titles and their positions. We should not. We absolutely.
I love that.
The show's called Wild Courage. And inside of that, there's this deep component of vulnerability.
where we're really able to connect to one another in these ways where we go underneath like what this experience is for people. Because, well, first, I think there's a statistic, I don't know exactly what it is, but more children than we can fathom are being abused. And more children than we can fathom don't understand what that is to even speak
Absolutely.
to what that is. So what I want to get under and really connect with you on is like, show us what is that experience in life when something like that happens to a child. And this for many has happened, and maybe the memory comes out later, but what is this that we're protecting? Like what is the ripple effect? What is the experience that has you live inside of life having something like that happen?
Well, I think that, it gives me the chills. From the very moment that a child is violated, they're told to stay silent. And then through the entire process, whether or not they turn their perpetrator, their abuser in, they're told to stay silent. And so there is this unspoken, like literally no pun intended, silence that comes with being a victim, regardless of what path you go, whether it's to turn someone in or just not disclose for your entire life. And then you're questioned every step of the way. My abuser's been convicted, and I'm still having to plea what happened to this date. I mean, today, he just filed with the Arizona Supreme Court. It's been 20 years. And I'm still having to plea what happened to me, even though he's convicted and he's pled guilty. And so I think that when you're violated by an adult and then you're told to trust adults to disclose to and trust them to help you through the process, it's really hard for a child to understand what that means. How can I trust an adult when one harmed me? And so I think that it creates something moving forward in your life forever, regardless of what happens in a certain person's situation.
I'm sure you've seen the movie Spotlight, and I'm sure everyone here is aware of, the Catholic Church and a lot of that. For me, I grew up Roman Catholic, right? I went to church, got confirmed, all that kind of stuff. And then as I got older and kind of more aware and educated about society, I was like, wait a minute. And I would start to look at news articles and I'm like, wait a minute, this is happening in this church that I was, grew up with, and maybe I need to reevaluate my own thoughts and beliefs. Outside of the Catholic Church, that was when like the light bulb went off for me. Outside of that, you look at all different types of organizations. And I think like with the Epstein client list and now the P. Diddy stuff, I think American society is becoming more and more aware and awake to a lot of these sex crimes. How prevalent is this stuff? How often is it happening? I mean, without putting a number on it, because we can't, where children, teens, and even adults are just not speaking out because they don't want all the blowback.
Look out every window in this room. Every direction you look, it's happening. Sound of Freedom was great for awareness, but it ultimately distracted us from what's happening right here in our own cities and towns, and even in America. What happened in that movie is also happening right here in our backyards. And our minds are wired to protect us. And so we almost can't fathom that that's an actuality and a reality in our cities and in our schools and our churches. But perpetrators, they prey. They prey on children. They purposely place themselves in these environments where children are taught to trust the title or the environment. It's everything they do is calculated, and they target the victims within those like entities and places.
Your abuser was in your school, is that correct?
He was my teacher, my PE teacher, and also my club soccer coach.
A club soccer coach, PE teacher. Fast forward, now you're a proud mother. How do you deal with that when you're not going to be with your kids 24/7. Your kids are not homeschooled. Your kids are going to go into school and they're going to do sports and they're going to do choir and ballet, whatever it is. How do you make sure they're safe? I mean, are you vetting everybody that your kids are around in these settings?
I vet a lot of people, I'll be honest.
How do you do that? Seriously.
Research. The internet is a great thing. You can do a deep dive on anybody, and it's amazing what information you can find on the internet.
You're giving me like a vibe like, trust me, I vet. Like, you don't want to say everything, but you really do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you can't vet everybody. And even if you do, you can't find everything. But I am, my parents sent me to school. They didn't think they were sending me to school to be molested. They had no idea. My mom worked at the school. My mom was a building over. She had no idea. And that's part of the grooming process and, befriending my parents the way that my abuser did. But I am so open with my kids. I don't teach them, and not that no one is safe, because we don't want to teach that. But, we have this stigma in society, watch out for the scary guy in the van. No,
Right.
That's not what we need to be teaching our children. We need to be teaching them what inappropriate behavior looks like, crossing boundaries. It doesn't matter if someone is your teacher, your coach, your pastor. Just because these adults have these so-called trusted positions does not mean that we put all our trust into them. We have safe people, and then, we have people that we are overly cautious and aware of. I think that in our house, like I said, we are very open with our kids. And, I'm in an interesting time, and in my journey of being a survivor with my kids, because my oldest daughter is 14 and she's a freshman in high school. And I turned my abuser in September, my freshman year of high school. And so I look at her and I am so proud that she gets to just be 14, because I didn't know what that was like. I was surviving. I was literally going through the judicial process when I was 14 years old. My entire soccer club, my family turned against us. People just came after us in the most just despicable way. And I was a child. And I can't imagine my 14-year-old having to live that right now. And then my 11-year-old is in 6th grade. And that's how old I was when he started sexually abusing me. And so I have like both ends. And I am very open with my story. It has definitely fueled my PTSD to kind of skyrocket, because I don't know how I survived that. When I look at my innocent children, I don't know how I did it. Yeah. But you just do.
Well, I want to reflect something to you. As horrid as this is going to be 2 parts. Everybody in this room can just feel this is just unfathomable. It's just so confusing to try to understand a mindset like that. And some things are just, this happened. It's fate. It's almost like maybe after the fact, absolutely after the fact, you can understand how to position yourself. Everybody gets wiser, smarter. But I will say this was just going to happen to you because your parents didn't know. And there's a strength that was born through this journey. And I can feel that. And now you being a stand for others. So I first want to tell you that even though this was horrid, right? And even though you had to go through something that most of us couldn't imagine, I will say what was born with that, and this doesn't happen to everyone, but what was born with that, with you, from that with you, is a really, really anchored strength. And your children are blessed now to have you as a mother, and not to promote fear. I saw you correct that. It's not like everybody's scary, but there's a lot of depth to you, almost like these roots were born through you. All of that contrast caused some real brilliance, and that's what I see. One thing that I want to touch on is we think about this and what happens to the children, but as we talk about Diddy and we talk about this everywhere, look everywhere, what I want to begin to understand is, what is that mind? It's so common. What's the sickness? Walk me into, I want to understand that person, because if we never address this sickness that's so prevalent right now, how are we ever going to cause this to stop? What is that sickness?
I wish I could walk you into it, but how can I explain something that I cannot understand?
Yeah.
You can't. And I think that predators, they constantly and continually move their moral compass. And I personally believe that it's the thrill of the unacceptable is part of their, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to explain that, because
it's such a good point that you're bringing up, because that's the cause, right? So you say that. You use the word sickness. Is it a sickness, like a disease? Is it a lot of times now, and you know this better than anyone, we like to put labels on things. And it's like, okay, or maybe you're just fucked up and there's no like medical, but I'm not saying it's not that.
I know.
Is it like a sickness where we have to say, okay, we need to recognize this man has a sickness, and even maybe they need to have safe place to go to say, hey, listen, I'm feeling this kind of thing. What do I do? And I know in liberal circles, there's been a lot of talk about that of, I identify as a man that is attracted to young girls or young boys. Okay. It's my view that whether it's a sickness or not, we need to recognize it in people and have some kind of a path or a process. I look at the same thing with like traumatized kids that become these school shooters. Well, call it out, recognize it, and what are we going to do about it? So like, where do we go? If someone's like watching this and they're like, oh my God, like my uncle, whatever, I believe he has this problem. Do I just turn him into the police?
Well, but then you're putting in adult choices and their responsibilities onto a child, and we can't do that. Children cannot be held accountable and expected to be responsible for adult decisions. Adults know better. And it's not a sickness, it's a choice. It's not a mistake. It's a very conscious choice. And even if they do have this very disturbing sexual preference, it's unacceptable. And the more we move the compass in society to make it seem acceptable, the more they're going to push. The more lenient we get, the more they're going to push back. So we have to have hard lines, and that's in protecting our children, period, from predators.
And let me be clear. When I use the word sickness, and I wanna adjust that, it's what everybody in this room would view as sort of this aligned, maybe like an open heart, just what comes naturally to love, right? And doing the best you can in life. And then there's this other category that's just so out of that realm that it's confusing.
Yeah.
And so even though I am 100% in agreement, the hard line, simultaneously, because I get into researching and studying the brain and why humans do what we do and in our own darkness, right? It's certainly not that, but we have our own shadows that we have to be confronted with and look head on because none of us are perfect. But I want to simultaneously study the brain because we all know that there is now these cases where we're looking at these brains, people that are murderers, people that do this crazy shit. There is like these something's going on with their brain and they can see that now. And I guess that was just sort of this curiosity that I have, in no way condoning, but we also know abusers are usually abused and then it causes some kind
That's
of...
actually not true.
Oh, it's not true.
Mm-mm. They like to portray and say that people who sexually abuse have been sexually abused, but it's actually a smaller percentage than what most people think.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Very, very big misconception when it comes to those who sexually abuse children specifically.
I want to take this one layer deeper, if I may. A lot of people, I've had people in my life come out to me that haven't come out publicly and admitted that there was some sexual abuse in their past, in their childhood. And the reason they didn't come out was because it was a family member.
Yes.
It was a distant uncle. Or
97% of victims know their perpetrator on a personal level.
So I want to take this like 10 levels deeper. If we have, and judging by what you said, how normal, prevalent is this? And you told us, just look outside the window, it's happening everywhere. So we have people right now watching this clip that are victims. Maybe they're even going through it right now. Maybe they're thinking about when they were a 14-year-old girl or boy. And they haven't come out. They haven't told their mom. They haven't told their dad. They haven't told authorities. But they're watching this. And they're like, oh my God, this Kayleigh is an incredible woman. But that's not me. I cannot come out because I have a career and now I'm married and I have society and everything is set up for me in life. Why would I throw some kind of a monkey wrench into this perfect little life I'm living? But deep down, I'm going through what Kayleigh's going through. I have PTSD. I have trauma. I wake up crying. What do you say to the viewers that have experienced this and they're just living with it?
Well, again, regardless of what path you take, whether you turn your perpetrator in or you carry it through, you are living with it. You are left to pick up the pieces of what someone else chose to do to you. And I would never blame, with the way the judicial process is, I would never blame someone for not turning their abuser in, ever. The abuse itself is hell and it's awful, but it's nothing that comes compared to when you turn your abuser in. it's nothing. It doesn't even, to me, it's almost uncomparable. The hell that comes after and the later trauma that's where the PTSD comes in. And I never understood PTSD. And I actually pushed back with my therapist for a really long time. I don't have PTSD. No, I absolutely do. It's not normal to wake up every night screaming and sweating. It's not normal to have days where you cannot get out of bed. And I have those days. People don't see that. I share some of it, but I don't share all of it. And I get it. And it's very relatable for so many people. And so I would tell other victims, you have to find what works for you, because you can only heal from within. You can't control all the exterior circumstances and the things that are happening around you. But when you heal from within, you have a little bit more in your window of tolerance. You have a little bit more room to take on the things when they come very heavily towards you.
That's interesting. That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting you to say, yes, get some strength, tell the police, tell whoever's close around you. And you're saying, actually, that's the most dramatic part, and maybe that path is not for everybody.
Yeah, I don't. And it's awful to say that, because I believe every survivor deserves justice. But the sad reality is that most people, even after turning, I don't feel like I've gotten justice at all. And I'm still dealing with this 20 years later. Yeah. And so I believe every perpetrator deserves to be held accountable, but I don't believe that there's even accountability anymore. And the battle it's awful.
I watch your content on social media. And by the way, I mean, you've done an amazing job. Like the amount of stuff that you put out there, how honest, obviously we can see on the show today, how honest and open you speak about these things. Your political involvement, not just walking the walk, but you're talking the talk, and you're out. I mean, you're putting yourself out there. I mean, I've seen you testify before, politicians, you're out at events, you're speaking, so much that you do. And I applaud you for that, because I think a lot of citizens should be more involved. I think you'll probably run for office in the future. We'll talk later. But what I wanted to touch on is a video I watched. You're in an interview, and you were talking about this power struggle between victim and abuser, and how, especially when you're young, the abuser is in a powerful position, and sometimes the victim doesn't even know that what's happening is wrong. And it's like this strange dynamic, because the abuser is in charge. Do you think a lot of young people that are being abused don't even necessarily know that what's happening is wrong?
Absolutely. It's the grooming process. They're again, sex offenders and predators don't make mistakes. They make choices. It's everything that they do is a very calculated, intentional choice to place themselves in the position to take it one step further. And it's a very slow process. And as much grooming as they do for the victim themselves, they're working 10 times harder to groom those around them. For example, my abuser, he used to call me and pull me out of class and call me into his office. Well, he was sexually abusing me, but do you know how many kids he was pulling out of class and not touching? Probably 20. So then when I turn him in, this didn't happen, by the way, but had they done what they were supposed to do, an interview, which they did not, for the record, those 20 kids would have said, no, he never touched, he never did anything to me.
Wow.
And that was calculated.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Think about it.
And as I listen to you talk, there is this sort of like, what you're fighting for. I want to begin to really be clear, understand that, because I feel very aligned with you. And I remember being in this conversation with my dad. I don't remember what other countries we were referring to. We were like, you know why they don't have any crime rate? You know why it's so low, right? Is because you do this, you're done. And so they stopped doing it. And so you're right. In this judicial system, we know that there's all these little loopholes, especially the powers that be.
Absolutely.
Right, in the Diddy world. And it's so prominent now. And so if that was the case, and why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be the case? Now, I do want to touch on this factor with how much is made up? How much do we have to deal with maybe a woman making it up? or a child not fully understanding and making it up. How rare is that, and how do we work that into the picture?
We know it does happen. We know women make it up. I think the Me Too movement was a joke. That's my personal opinion. Children, again, we cannot blame children. If and that's something else we tell our kids. If their intuition or someone makes them uncomfortable, there is no question. There is no pushing. Nope, we're done. We're not having we're not going to challenge or ignore our children's feelings and intuition. Because when you do that on the most surface level, how can you expect them to tell you on a deeper level? You can't. So we know that there are things that are exaggerated, made up, falsified, those kinds of things. I think any grown adult woman who makes up or lies about being sexually abused, I think they deserve to be prosecuted at the fullest extent.
Agreed.
But again, even in that aspect, there's no accountability. They get off with a slap on the wrist. So why wouldn't they? Same thing for perpetrators who are actually committing these crimes. Why wouldn't they? There's not really punished. There's no certainty in punishments. There's too much leniency and leeway. But I think that is such a small percent in comparison to the reality of children being sexually abused.
I just want to, what she was saying about other countries and their penalties and their laws. So are we at a good place right now? Let's talk about Arizona. Prop 313. I mean, are we at a good place? If there's somebody that's convicted out there, I believe, and you know all about this, they're going to jail for life, right?
If they're convicted, yes. Yeah.
So I see the sarcastic look on your face. We're not at a good. You think the law should be stronger? What needs to change, Kayleigh? What needs to change?
We need accountability within the prosecutors and judges. They hold all the power. And here's what people don't understand. You'll hear people, especially in political positions within Arizona, when it comes to attorneys and those kinds of things, not necessarily legislators, because yes, they create the laws, but they're not the one implementing them. It doesn't matter what is on the books. People will scream all day long, Arizona has such great sex offender laws. Well, not when they're not being enforced. There are so many loopholes. What people don't understand is that you're charged, convicted, and sentenced. Okay. What you're charged with is not what you're convicted of. And do you know it's like less than like 10% of these cases go to trial?
What?
So since I've heard cussing, there. Oh no, it's one big circle jerk is what it is. It's this prosecutor and this defense attorney and this what can we all do to meet in the middle here? And there's no cases that are going to trial where these perpetrators are actually being convicted anywhere close to near what they're charged with. Examples are you can be charged with 6 Class 2 felonies, and then they'll plea you down to 2 Class 3 and 1 attempted. So we're talking extremes, but people don't understand. And again, we're expecting people in their hardest times and their deepest traumas to comprehend what's going on.
Okay.
I'm deeply curious because we're innocent until proven guilty. How do we approach that if you have to prove that they're guilty? And is hearsay enough of that? Does that cause proof? Meaning like this person's saying it, this person's saying it. I just want to understand, where's the glitch? There's a glitch somewhere. So why is there only 10% when there's so much of this?
Because why would they, if they can all agree and do plea deals and not go to court and move on, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they?
Because of the money to go to court?
I just think it's everything. I think it's very compounded. I think even prosecutors, defense attorney, it helps with their statistics and the things that they put out as well. Going to trial, you just don't see it anymore, especially within sex crimes.
Well, I'm glad you're here today speaking out. So I got to get to this before we finish. So there's this narrative out there, and I'm going to say it, and this is not a political talk today, but a little bit for a minute. Among conservative women, and there's this kind of quote they use, save our children. And I see it all over my social media all the time, save our children. And a lot of the times I believe it's relating to human sex trafficking and child sex trafficking over the border. But I see this like save our children, save our children. But it's conservative women that are putting that out there. Why is like this save our children issue and this abuse and all, why is it probably get some blowback for saying this, but it seems like it's somewhat of a political issue. Like I don't hear it as much on one side as I do on the other side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't understand, and I'm a political guy, like I'm deep, right? I'm real deep in the politics. I never understood the Save Our Children movement and why it's only majority conservative women.
I think we need like 12 more hours.
Did I touch on something though?
Yeah, I think that within that aspect, conservative versus liberals, and it is hard, but I think conservatives want to protect their children and their innocence and preserve it, where liberals are exposing their children and they don't see any mental, just an emotional distress is placed on a children when they're taking them to these drag shows. They're looking at inclusion. If someone within a drag show is having to express themselves sexually in front of children to feel validated, that's disgusting. Okay. And their parents are looking at it as inclusion, where conservatives are more looking at it as like you're literally exposing and exploiting your children to sexual things. I do think that per se, like someone who is more, Democrat or liberal wouldn't take their children to Chippendale or their little child to Chippendales and watch them dance around on a stage. But if they throw on a dress and some makeup, it's inclusion. So I think it's just, like I said, we could talk about it forever, but
I didn't factor in kind of the social issues with the trans and all that kind of stuff. I was just thinking more from an abuse standpoint. But what you're saying is it's this more inclusion on the left versus no, we need to stick to more conservative values on the right. And that's where the Save the Child. Okay.
I think
that helps me understand. I've always wondered that. Like, why am I only getting the Save the Children messages from like hot chicks in MAGA hats? I mean, it's like, I'm sorry, but that's the truth.
Well, but I think too, on the far left side and exploiting of children and those things, I think social media and the internet is literally the devil. I think it's Satan's mission, is what I truly believe. There are good things about social media, but I think that parents are also exploiting their children and using them as clickbait. I think that you see these videos of the dad turning his son into a daughter, or, whatever. That's clickbait. That's a dopamine hit. And they're ignoring their children's mental needs, while they're also exploiting them for whatever they feel like doing. I posted one video, it was a while ago. This mom they had to be like maybe 18 months to 2 and like 4. Little girl and little boy, and she put condoms on their fingers. And she's like, oh, what are those? I don't even remember what she called them, bubble things. And I'm like, I'm sorry, no child, like my kids, like honestly, have gone under my bathroom cabinet and opened pads or tampons or whatever, children, but I'm not sitting there like filming them. No 4-year-old went and opened 10 condoms and perfectly placed them on their fingertips and called them bubble. I don't remember what she called them. And then you post it on the internet as if you're gloating. I made a video, me and Dom Izzo made a video and we're like, she didn't come after me because she knew I would share it. I think he did too though, but she ended up taking it down. But this thing had like 2 million shares, not even likes or views. And she turned the comments off. That is exploiting your children. That's clickbait. I'm sure she, hit an algorithm and was making money. It's despicable. And so I think that we see parents more on the left doing those types of things than on the right. I mean, you'll hardly see my kids on social media. That's to protect them. But I believe that a lot of parents exploit their children, especially on the left.
Interesting. Wow. I'd like to end up with this, if we could. I want you to look at that camera, Alexia. Look at that camera and just take like...
This one?
However much time you need, like, 15, 30 seconds. I just want you to leave us like with a message, but not really me or Ferrari or our audience, but like to the powers that be. To the people that are running our country, to the corporations, to the billionaires, to the new president, all of them. What steps do we need to take? What can they do to try to get this child sex abuse out of our country?
Oh, well, I think what we need to start with is what is portrayed is not an actuality. These headline catchers of capital punishment for sex offenders is never going to happen. Therefore, we're not actually creating a deterrent. We're giving false information and false hope to victims and their families, and perpetrators know that there is no accountability and there is no likelihood of that actually happening. We need to implement policy and laws that are an actuality, that they know are certain, because it's not the severity that serves as a deterrent, it's the certainty. And so it's time that as Americans, as parents, as just human beings who care about children and other human beings, that we step up and create laws that are attainable and that are an actuality and create a certainty, and that victims and more so children know that they will be protected, and perpetrators know that we are done. We're not fucking around. If you cross the line and you sexually abuse a child, you will suffer a serious consequence and there will be no way out of it. It's time that we step up and that we let children and victims know that we are standing with them and fighting for them, because you still matter.
I told you she'll be running for office one day.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Kayleigh.
your kindness and your talents. And when I met you a couple years back, I knew you were a rock star, and now you're showing it.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on, you guys. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.